Hey guys, welcome back to Andy's Dinosaur Reviews, and today we have another brand new TNG model to take a look at, and this one is a very interesting one. It didn't have a box or anything when it arrived. Seems like it's a little out of the ordinary, I guess, for the TNG line, because we've got a weird-looking Spinosaurus. Now, what's weird about it is we've already had a Spinosaurus before in the TNG line, and it was way closer to being an accurate interpretation. So I don't know if maybe this was like an early version of a Spinosaurus that they were creating, or if they just chose to kind of create one with a more accurate sort of a look, and then this one with kind of a JP3 look, but at the same time kind of not. It's almost like an early 2000s take on Spinosaurus, because most Spinosaurus reconstructions you saw around that time were sort of similar to the Jurassic Park 3 version, so again, kind of similar to that. It also has a kind of a striking resemblance to the Spinosaurus, which is something that can be said for a lot of the TNG line, where they kind of resemble other figures that are out currently, and very clearly they take inspiration from other companies when it comes to creating their figures, which in my opinion isn't a bad thing, because you can see, even though the sculpt looks pretty similar to what you would see with the Spino, it also has a lot of difference and its own original look at the same time, and very cool looking paint apps on this one as well. But you can see again, it absolutely has a similar look, the turn in the head and everything, to what the Spinosaurus has going on, but very different, very stylized look as far as their version of the Spinosaurus goes. So, without further ado, let's jump to a closer look at it right now. So, starting up here at the head sculpt of the Spinosaurus, you can see it's got a pretty cool look to it. You've got some nice looking skin texture for the most part. You've got quite a bit of ridges and stuff going on back here as you lead back here along the jawline, leading into the back of the head, even down here on the lower jaw, and then up and over the top of the head of the Spinosaurus. Quite a bit of color variation as well, as you can see. Again, we've got some blackish tones here, especially circling around the eye. You've got some dark browns. You have some light grayish tones. You've also got more of those black sort of striping through. You even have some little hints of pink right there, and then again more variation of color for the lower jaw. So definitely a lot going on as far as the paintwork goes here on this Spinosaurus in the head area. You can see the eye is painted really quite nicely with a yellow, given a nice black pupil. And it also sports a nice gloss coat, so it shines quite realistically. We do have an articulated jaw, kind of drops every once in a while, but for the most part it works pretty decently and closes fairly nicely. Doesn't open super wide, but I think that's a pretty good distance to open up here. You can see we've got some nice pinkish tones there on the inside of the mouth. You can also see some nice looking detailing there on the inside of the mouth, kind of like a darker pink running down the center of the tongue. So I do appreciate the fact that they added a little color variation to it to just add a little more realism to it. You can see the same thing pretty much there for the inside of the mouth on the upper jaw. And the teeth are all sculpted very nicely, sculpted for the most part individually. They're painted with like a brown and then given a black, so it adds a little bit of like a dirty sort of an appearance to it, which I also quite like. I think is a nice dose of realism. As you move back here into the neck, you can see some pretty big ridges here moving from the top of the head down the back of the neck. You can also see some osteoderms and stuff poking up here and there. Similar sort of a color scheme here as far as the design goes to a Jurassic Park 3 Spinosaurus, moving down the neck at least, as we have like that light striping that moves down, and you can also see how the light striping sort of like trails off and stripes out as you move down the course of the neck. You've got some nice looking skin wrinkles and skin detail here on the underside of the neck and throat. You can see the throat itself down here on the underside of the Spino as you move down. You've got a pretty nice looking arm sculpt here. You can also see some darker variations of browns as you move down the course of the arms and then down into the fingers. You've got some scoots running down the fingers and some, pretty decent nail paint. As you can see, the nails start with a darker tone and kind of lead out to a lighter tone for the tips of the nails. Then as you move back up here into the stomach, you see more of that kind of light tone that's sort of like a very light gray sort of striping and designing here moving along the course of the stomach. You see more of those variations of browns and that kind of very interesting looking skin texture that we have for this Spinosaurus. Some more osteoderms and stuff as you move up here to the top of the dinosaur. And then as you lead up into the sail, you can see quite a bit of variation of color up here in the sail, as you've got some like light greenish, like almost yellowish green tones, you've got some bluish tones, you've got black kind of striping and spotting in and stuff. Definitely looks really cool, very pleasing to the eye as far as the tones of color used for this sail, that's for sure. And as you move back down into the leg here, you can see the thigh has a striping effect moving from the back into the front of the thigh, also kind of reminiscent to a JP3 Spino. But you can see the kneecap here in the front of the leg. You can also see a nice calf muscle. And again, we darken to a darker brown as we move down into the foot. You've got scoots running down the front of the toes. And then some decent paintwork there for the nails. You can also see kind of like a sort of a shine to the nails, which is a nice touch. And you've also got the dew claw. And then as you move back up, you've got a few skin wrinkles right here back behind the thigh. As you lead up into the tail, you again have that striping effect return moving out through the course of the tail, but then it kind of tapers off. It just has a few spots as you lead out. You've also got more of those ridges here running along the top of the tail as you lead out as well, which have a very cool bluish tone to them. You can see a nice curve to the tail as you lead out. Very, very nice, majestic looking curve to the tail. You've got a lighter tone here for the underside, as well as some more, again, really nice looking sculpt and detail here moving along the underside of the Spinosaurus here. Really, really impressive sculpt and detail. I can even see some light pinkish tones added to the underside of the Spinosaurus. The paintwork of the TNG models is really quite awesome consistently. And then you can see again what the head sculpt looks like over here. Again, that nicely painted eye. As we lead back here into the neck, you can see the neck is now turning away from us, so there's kind of more tensing and stuff here in the neck than you would have seen on the initial side because of the turn facing away. You can see the ridges again up there on the back of the neck. And then as you move down, you can see the arm on this side is definitely in a different position than the arm we saw on the initial side. Same style of coloration and everything, but definitely a different position, held a little bit further back into the body than what we saw on the first side. As we check out the stomach region, you can see that the stomach's opened up a little bit more because this leg is trailing slightly compared to what we see on the opposing leg. You can kind of see the skin stretching off of the leg right there. Again, same style of sculpt, same style of paint here moving through. The sail also looks really nice, quite flashy over here. And then we lead down here into the thigh. Again, everything looks pretty much the same, pretty consistent with what we had seen on the first side. Again, as we move out here into the tail. So definitely a really cool Spino. Again, even though it's not your most accurate interpretation, we had a closer version than that in the TNG line initially, but this one's also pretty cool. I definitely like the fact that they've included two different versions of the Spinosaurus. Technically three, if you count the larger, sort of softer version that they have out. As far as a size goes, for a length from the tail to the snout of the Spinosaurus, about 13 inches or 33 centimeters. And then for a height, the highest point is definitely the head. You are looking at, well, it's kind of tough to tell. If the foot's flat, I'd say about 5.5 inches or 14 centimeters, but it's kind of leaning back, which causes it to be closer to 6 inches or 15 centimeters. The Spinosaurus has kind of a slight warping issue with its foot. I've noticed that the feet don't stand perfectly. It actually doesn't look so bad here right now. I did try to bend it back, but you can see how this toe's like lifting up off the ground. The dino's kind of leaning to its right because the legs are a little warped. So it doesn't stand perfectly, but see, you can see it's starting to fall. You just have to get it in that sweet spot or bend the leg back out. But of course, I'm going to have to like try to heat it up and then use the hot water, cold water trick to try to get it to stand and reposition that leg. But seems like it would stand pretty decently if the legs hadn't warped in transit. But regardless, for a size comparison, there is Mr. Papo T-Rex, the Attack Pack Colovosaurus, and Robert Muldoon from the Mattel Jurassic World toy line next to our TNG Spinosaurus, and you can see pretty decently sized, definitely one of the biggest TNG models that we've had so far, as most are usually quite a bit smaller than this. So that is something that is pretty exciting about this one, and to further show you that, here is a comparison with the Carnotaurus that I recently reviewed from TNG as well, and you can see the Carnotaurus is quite a bit smaller than our Spinosaurus here is. And for another comparison, a figure from the TNG line I like to use for comparisons because I know it is a popular one. We've got the woolly mammoth here standing in next to our Spinosaurus as well. We also have the first Spinosaurus release from TNG that I had already taken a look at in the past, next to our newer version of the Spinosaurus from TNG. And again, you can see very different appearance for both, very different style for both. So pretty interesting again to see such a massive difference between two different versions of the same dinosaur from the same company. And just in case you want another TNG comparison, we also have the Elasmotherium, which is probably just as popular, or maybe even more, than the woolly mammoth next to the Spinosaurus. And then for another comparison, we have the Spinosaurus, the figure that I feel like clearly influenced the TNG version, here standing next to the TNG version. And you can see, again, very similar sort of pose. Obviously, the arms are kind of similar, but in different positions. The legs are very similar as far as the position. Even the slight tilt in the ankle on the rear side. Very different sculpt as far as the fine detail goes. So you can very clearly see, like, it's not a bootleg or anything, but it obviously has been influenced by the Spinosaurus. And the sail, again, looks quite a bit different. Everything as far as the fine detail honestly looks different, especially when it comes to the head sculpt and everything. But you can see, again, a slight right turn to the Spinosaurus from TNG, stronger right turn from the version, but you can see similar as far as even the bend in the tail. Not quite the same, but kind of similar. So I think it's safe to say at this point, this far in, TNG definitely gets influence for their figures from other companies, and we can very much so clearly see where the influence for this Spinosaurus came from. So this brand new TNG Spinosaurus is pretty cool. You know, it's definitely not my favorite figure from the line, but I do really like it because it's got a really cool kind of stylized look to it that you don't see very often anymore. Although you do see Jurassic Park 3 versions of Spinosaurus quite often, and this sort of resembles that. But at the same time, it has more of just like that classic sort of bipedal, almost like early 2000s interpretation of a Spinosaurus, and I think it looks really neat because of that. It's almost like the perfect mixture of how we actually saw Spinosaurus at this time, well, at the time of like the early 2000s, mixed with the JP3 Spino. And I think they did a very good job on the actual fine detail. The fine detail looks very nice. The overall design as well looks really cool. Again, very stylized, but definitely unique enough that it would be memorable. And especially with like those ridges and everything all over the face and leading up and over the top of the crest on the Spinosaurus. Definitely looks really cool. And on top of that, they've given it a very nice pose. Very similar, I will say, to the version, but it looks good. You know, it obviously is kind of like an ode to the Spinosaurus. Maybe it's just sort of like their dedication to that figure. But you can also see, again, on top of that pose, we've also got a nice paint scheme for it that looks nice and naturalistic, I would say. And there's a lot of color added to it, lots of really smooth transitions, and very nice, very naturalistic application of the paintwork. Also, pretty cool flashy look there to the sail as well of the Spinosaurus. So even though it does have a little bit of like a warping in the legs, I don't know if that's something that would be a mass issue. I don't know if that's just kind of strictly an issue with mine, because mine came without a box, so it kind of warped through transit, and now it doesn't stand so well. I should be able to fix it with a little hot water, cold water trick, but I don't know, again, if that's an issue, if this figure does come with a box at all, because like I said, I didn't get one with it, so I don't know for sure. What I do know is it's a pretty darn cool figure, and definitely one that I'm happy to enter into my collection. This, though, is yet another figure that I was able to acquire by the one and only Dino Mike Mac, so a massive thank you goes out to him. And unfortunately, I don't have any clue where to actually direct you guys to pick one up, because I don't know for sure where they are for sale. As soon as I can find a link, I will update the description with that link so you guys can buy it. But in the meantime, if you happen to stumble upon it, pick it up. You know, it's a pretty fun figure. And also let me know in the comment section what you guys think of it, and also like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next review. Thanks for watching.